And thank you for joining us today. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis, your host, and we're going to talk about travel. Not just to particular destinations, but what you need to think about when you're ready to embark on that world adventure that you're planning on, whether it's with you, yourself, a spouse, or maybe the rest of your family or the whole clan, who knows. But there are a lot of things that you need to consider. First of all, the obvious, where are you going to go? Then what is it going to take for you to get there? How long are you going to be gone for? Are you going to be prepared for any emergencies or perhaps the lost luggage with all the valuables that maybe you collected from Bolivia? Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is what we call our Beyond 50 consumer advocates, Derek Ewell and Jenny Waters. They're joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today to share their experience and also some very helpful tips for those of you who are about ready to plan on some wonderful excursion to take you into Never Never Land. And Derek and Jenny, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Thank you for having us.
Hey there.
Betcha. Now, I understand that you just recently took about a 24-day trip going to South America and even stretching as far as the Antarctic. Why don't you go ahead and share with us what that adventure was like, first of all?
Well, it was an amazing adventure. We were gone for pretty much the month of January, leaving on January 4 and getting back on January 27. And it was a combination of a land tour in Argentina and then a 16-day cruise that took us to various ports and into the Antarctic. So it was an awesome experience.
Anything you have to say there, Derek, or are you going to leave it all up to Jenny?
No.
Yeah, I was hand motioning to him like, now's your cue.
Well, this trip was like a year and a half in planning, with various payments along the way, and so, and it was, to me, I wanted to go to Antarctica, but I never thought I'd really be going there, so it was amazing.
It was never on my top of the list. I thought Mediterranean, Africa, someplace like that. But we had a friend who has a travel agency, which is really one of the best ways I think you can go, is through somebody who knows the ropes of foreign travel. And so he was organizing a group, and so he approached us and said, this is what we're going to do, and we had about a year and a half to get it together and said, let's go for it.
Now, tell us about some of the adventures and some of the experiences that you had while you were, of course, traveling in Argentina, as you were saying, and then the various ports leading up into the Antarctic. What was that like?
Well, first of all, our flight left from Atlanta, Georgia, and it was 9 hours to get to Buenos Aires, Argentina. And that 9-hour flight was like being in the twilight zone, because one is you don't sleep, but you sleep a little bit here and there, off and on, off and on. And every time I took a nap, I thought maybe I slept for 2 or 3 hours. When I wake up, it really wasn't 2 or 3 hours, like a half an hour.
Uh-huh.
So I kept going in and out, and they had games and, they had media you could play with and watch TV and things like that. But it was dark the whole time. It was really an interesting experience.
It was surreal. It was the first time we'd ever been on such a long flight. So we started out with a very long trip, getting to Atlanta, early morning flight from Portland, then being in Atlanta for 9 hours, and then a 9-hour flight to Buenos Aires. So by the time we got there, we were tired.
Exhausted.
And so the first 2 days were kind of a blur. And, of course, we get to the hotel via our bus once we meet our group at the airport. And then they say, well, you have like a half an hour to rest in your room once they let you into your room. And then we're going to go on a bus tour.
But actually we had to wait in like the bar for 2 hours before we could get in our room.
Yeah, at the hotel. We decided that was a travel ploy from the hotel to get us to buy drinks in their lobby. So
that certainly makes sense. Let's extract as much as we can along the way. This is necessary.
Absolutely. Those foreign American tourists have money to spend.
Yeah, you can see why now that William Shatner had the nightmare on the flight in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
It's got to be 9 hours. I've got to imagine something here. Now, what was the Antarctic like? I mean, this here is pretty much desolate. Anybody who's even seen Marching with Penguins understands this is just an icy, cold world. But what was that like to be down there?
It was magical. I would say, well, of course, first of all, it's a desert. an ice desert. And the way it was with us is we left from the Falkland Islands because that was our first stop after we left from Buenos Aires, and it seemed like 3 days or 2 days later we were in Antarctica, and suddenly there were all these icebergs. It was like it's just like they magically appeared, and then when we left they magically disappeared.
Tons of beautiful, beautiful, huge icebergs and ice shelves that they call them, which are very flat and elongated. I don't even know, probably a mile in length, some of them.
Oh, yeah.
Or more.
Oh, yeah.
And very high mountains. And we actually didn't get to set foot in Antarctica because we were on such a large cruise ship. And there are expedition ships that actually let you get off and go walk on the tundra and see penguins up close and things like that in the Antarctic, but we didn't do that.
Well, even though we didn't do that, the Polish Research Center team came from their research center and got on our ship and talked to us about their life as researchers in Antarctica, and we thought that was interesting.
It was very interesting, and one of the things that really struck me about Antarctica, which I was not prepared for, was how sunny it was. And it was actually warm on the days that we were there. Of course, they said, you guys are really lucky because we had just phenomenal weather. And it was probably 50, 55 degrees in the sun out on the deck on the ship.
Even 60.
Yeah.
And
well, it just seems delightful. It's just kind of giving the folks an idea why one would want to travel to a place like the Antarctic, because the first thing that comes to mind is the cold. Now, you planned your trip. It had a lot to do with the ship. Tell us about what it is to choose the right kind of cruise line and why that's very important, what you need to look into when you're considering something like that.
Well, you need to really think about, of course, cost is one of the first things to think about. Because you're budget-minded. Most of us are budget-minded when we travel. This trip was an extravagant, expenditure for us, I would say.
It's like a trip of a lifetime.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We went on the Princess Cruise Line, which is mid-range price. There are definitely higher-end ships. Holland America is higher-end. Of course, the Cunard ships with the QM2, those are, luxury liners. The Princess is very nice. It's probably a step up from Carnival. You can get the room that we got was a mini suite, which I would totally recommend if you like to be in your room at all when you're on a ship for this length of time, because it was probably about 350 square feet.
Yeah.
And so we had all kinds of room, all kinds of closet space, actually 2 TVs, one that faced the bed and one that faced the couch. So, just in case one of us wants to watch what's happening on the ship channel and the other one wants to watch a movie, you can do that. And they have satellite TV, so you can actually get CNN occasionally.
And this particular, our suite had a tub, which we like to take baths. And so a tub was great. And it was, it wasn't a dinky tub. It was a proper-sized tub.
Yeah.
And like Jenny talked about storage, well, we had storage under our bed. We had a closet. We had a safe that we could put things in. And we had a balcony, of course. We could go out and look at the ocean.
Spent a lot of time on the balcony just looking out and watching the beautiful scenery go by, which is tremendously relaxing. Now, because Princess was a huge ship, there was about 2,500 passengers and 1,000 crew, or 1,100 crew members. So it's huge. But I never had a sense of overcrowding or, wow, there's just too many people on this ship. It wasn't noisy.
No.
So that was very nice.
And the ship was so big, it was the biggest ship that we saw in the entire trip. Whenever we dock or go any other place and see other ships, ours was the biggest one we were on.
My goodness.
Of course, with the big ship, they have tons of activities. For people that like to be really active on the ship, you can go to classes. Derek partook of some Photoshop classes on the ship. So they have computer classes, they have travel classes, just lots of activities. And then, of course, there's the sports deck. You can go walk around. They have a huge gymnasium where you can work out, so you can work off all the weight that you gain on the ship, eating
the midnight dessert, yeah.
Yeah. And so we've been on the Holland America Cruise Line, which is about half as big as the Princess ships. about 1,200 people, and I would say I didn't really notice that much difference in the quality of service. So I think it really just depends on what you want.
I would say there was somewhat of a difference, and that is on Holland America, I believe they got all of our orders wrong.
Our room service orders, that was a chronic problem.
Yeah, but on this ship, for like the first 7 days, they got it right.
We ordered a lot of room service, which is one of our favorite things to do on ships. I love room service, and there's no charge for it because the meals are included in the cost of the cruise. The only thing that you are charged for is beverages, if you want soda pop, if you want alcohol. If you want juice after 11:30 in the morning, which I thought was kind of weird, then you're charged for it.
Well, they also had a charge for if you wanted a 10-ounce, how many ounces?
Like a larger glass of juice.
Yeah, a larger, more than 8 ounces, then they'd charge you with that. Otherwise, they'd deliver the 8 ounces to you.
It was a little...
So the supersize drink is out of the question, pretty much.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
And
now, how about the other types of shipboard charges that people can expect? Obviously, the food's all paid for.
Yes.
Room service is free, but pretty much beverages, things like that, you'll have to pay for on your own.
Beverages you'll pay for. You'll pay for the internet access if you want to get in touch with people back home. You can pay by the minute, which is about 75 cents per minute, or you can buy internet packages and then get a discount, which, I would recommend if people really think they're going to be online, because the connections can be slow because it's a satellite connection. And so it's not always even available. They actually shut down the internet cafe for a couple of days when they had no satellite service. So that's a charge. You can buy photographs every single day of the week.
They set up situations where they'll take a picture of you when you get on the boat. They'll take a picture of you when you do the life jacket vest test. Then they'll take a picture of you when you get off the boat at any place. So they take pictures of you constantly, and then they offer them for sale. And I believe the average price is like $30 a picture?
Well, no, the pictures are $15, and then they have frame upsells.
Yeah.
If you want to put it in a frame or a scrapbook or a photo album, and then they sell the video of the trip. And so we would see people lined up at the photo gallery racking up $200, $300 bills for pictures.
Goodness gracious. I was just thinking, too, that must have been an interesting photo of you and Derek jumping off the deck to test your life vest out in the Antarctic waters. One of those polar bear trips there.
I stepped out on the lifeboat demonstration. I just hoped that Derek would come back and tell me what I was supposed to do if we started to sink.
Well, one thing that you have to know is they threaten you if you don't show up for these tests. They say they're going to come and hunt you down. But
they do. They said that on the loudspeaker. We know if you're here. And I was like, oh no, they're going to come knocking on the cabin door and get me out of bed because I was resting and tell me to get down there, but they didn't.
So actually, by the time we got on the ship, of course, we had the 9 hours, the 2 big flights, one for 9 hours, and then in the process of being on a plane, you get dehydrated. So we were in the process when we got on the ship of rehydrating, which is,
So we were drinking all the time, water and juice, that is.
Yes, of course. You'd be more dehydrated down there in the south if you were drinking alcohol, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to tell you about one of the places that we went in Argentina before we got on the ship, which was awesome. It was a place that I had actually never heard of before we went on this trip, which was called Iguazu Falls. And it's in northern Argentina, and it's the largest falls in the world, I believe, maybe running neck and neck with Victoria Falls in Africa.
Well, I think it's bigger than that. It's supposedly a mile and a half at least across, maybe more, and I forget how many feet high it is.
So we had to fly from Buenos Aires on a very small plane, an Argentina flight, to get to this location, and we stayed there for a couple of days, and it's actually out in a jungle that you can go walking in the jungle and see the falls, and Derek and I had the fortunate opportunity to actually walk into the park before the park opened, before the park rangers threw us out.
Well, they have a sign saying that the park opens at 8 o'clock, but we went in at 7:30, and that's because we read in our travel book that in the morning you could see the animals.
So we wanted to go see the wildlife, and we got very lucky, and there were monkeys everywhere.
Yeah, the park ranger tried to chase us out, but on the way out, we ran directly into the monkeys. And we saw at least 30 monkeys, and they were like spider monkeys, and they were just amazing.
So that was an awesome photo opportunity. That's one place that I would love to go back to because it was very tropical and hot and humid, but just beautiful. Someplace, completely different than Oregon. Not that Oregon's beautiful.
Yeah, very good. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program, and we're talking with our consumer advocates, Jenny Waters and Derek Ewell, about their trip through South America on their way to Antarctic on a beautiful cruise down there where they were able to dodge icebergs, take pictures of penguins, and obviously irritate the snow monkeys there in Argentina, as I understand, just before the park rangers threw them out. That's what I call an American way to spend a vacation.
Exactly.
Now, that's one thing that is an interesting question, too, that when you go and you decide to do these kind of travels, I know I myself, I enjoy kind of being a loner, going out and enjoying things on my own, but you can also share with us right now what the pros and perhaps the cons are of traveling, doing it that way as well as also in groups, like doing those little mini tours. Share with us what that's like.
Well, with a group, one thing that we liked about the group is, there's one of our group. Let's follow them, and we'll get to the next spot. At the airport, where it's really hectic and lots of things going on.
In foreign airports, especially.
Yeah. When you can keep an eye on your group members, it helps you to get along. And at first, when we first got there was supposed to be someone with a sign, saying travel with Mike or who our group was.
Our group leader, yeah.
And we looked up and down and high and low, and we didn't see him. And we were like, where is he? But finally, we got out of that one area where we picked up our baggage, and we did see them. So then, and they were waiting for us. So that was good. If we didn't have a group, we'd just be, making that next decision ourselves.
And I think, when you're going to a foreign country, if you don't speak the language, like our Spanish is minimal, it's really, really...
Hablas poquito español.
Extremely basic. So it's nice to have that sort of set out for you. The arrangements have been made where you're going to go. We had a lot of time, especially on the cruise ship, away from the group, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Because prior to that, on the land tours, we had been with them every single day on the bus. And there was one dynamic that I noticed on the bus. They would say, the last one on the bus has to buy everybody drinks. And they were constantly, there was one woman who harassed Derek all the time, and she kept saying that he was late, and he actually wasn't. And so that started to irritate me a little bit.
I'll bet.
Well, that dynamic kind of changed because later in the trip, they started being late.
Yep. So then Derek got to harass them, so that was fun.
Well, see, the reason it's kind of interesting to know that, too, that when you're traveling in groups, there's kind of safety in numbers from the potentiality of scams, because obviously they see you as this American, you're just loaded with cash. They're going to get as much as they can, especially in an area like South America, having experienced what their economy is like. Believe me, they'll come at you left and right, and especially if you're alone, that's the time that you really need to be cautious. Now, let's talk about some of the foreign travel scams that maybe you didn't expect, that maybe you encountered, but you were able to kind of get away safely, and some of the manipulations that people can expect when they're in areas such as the ones that you visited.
I was going to say, you pointed something out that I think is really relevant about being alone versus being in a group, because we had one brief experience being alone in Buenos Aires. When we actually walked out on the street, because we had forgotten, which is very important, you wanted to take all your chargers for all your electronic devices with you. Well, I forgot our BlackBerry device, charger. So we went out on a little shopping trip to go and find a charger for our BlackBerry phone. And we're walking around on an extremely busy street. And I would say within 10 minutes we had been approached by 10 people that wanted to talk to us, sell us stuff, get money from us.
And one guy followed us for, half a block.
And it actually, was a little scary to me because I wasn't used to that.
And a scam that I feel was going on, when we landed in Oahu Falls, which I call Wowzoo because it's really amazing, and it's, in a tropical forest, which is the zoo part, our guide when we got there, we rode up in a bus. Immediately after we got there, he wanted to take us, to go see the falls. And that seemed like normal. That seemed great. But he didn't have any provisions for us to get any water or anything like that. Now, we carried our own water with us, but by the time we got to the falls, it was empty. So most of our group hiked at least 2 miles in the hot sun with no water. We went and filled up our water in a bathroom and got some water, and it happened to be great water. We were lucky for that.
Right.
But after the 2 mile hike in the heat and kind of not casual, but kind of keep moving, we ended up at a restaurant, and at the restaurant the water was 3 or 4 prices per bottle. And they had a meal, and so I felt like we were led to this restaurant, so we'd spend as much money as possible.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that only makes sense too.
And we would say, some people in the group said to our guide, who was from Brazil, and he was on the Argentina side of the falls, and they said, well, what about water? And, oh, well, there'll be water ahead. There's water just ahead. There's water just ahead.
Oh, that's right.
And so he kept saying that, and then, well, the water ahead was at this restaurant, and
no taps.
You're a limp dish rag by the time you get there, so you don't have much choice.
Uh-huh. Now, how far was this trek that you had to take?
It was about 2 miles.
2 miles.
And it was about 100 degrees or so, maybe.
Oh, my goodness.
It was well in the 90s, for sure.
Yeah, upper 90s with high humidity.
Oh. Did you encounter any other things people should be aware of as far as being manipulated? It sounds like water was one of them, but it seems like, leave this stuff behind, you won't really need it, then you discover you actually do on the way, and then they're going to sell it to you, kind of a thing.
Well, people want to give you, they want to give you change back in their currency.
Yes,
that's
in
another
pesos.
thing. They always want to give you pesos back.
In Argentina, their tradition is if you give them dollars, they'll give you pesos. Now, they themselves actually have dollars in their till, but they're not going to let go of those. They're going to give you pesos. So what we did is we found out exactly how much it was in dollars, and we tried to pay that amount. So we got no change. So we avoided getting change, and by doing that, we saved some money.
Yeah, and I don't think we lost much money, with the exchange rates and so on over
because
time.
The dollar at that time was 3 to 1, and I believe while we were away, the dollar was devalued a little bit while we were away. But in the Falkland Islands, the dollar was weak. How much was it?
Well, we bought something there at a little store, and it said our total was $15, but we had to actually fork over 31 American dollars.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That was a little shocking.
So needless to say, what we're hearing from you folks is there is a lot that you should really be prepared for. Now, can you kind of maybe go over a good brief checklist of things that people can consider before they embark on something like this? It sounds to me like even though you took about a year planning this whole thing, which it sounds like you were about as thorough as you could be without being in the experience, there were still those little things that got in the way, but those can be added to the checklist and chalked up for experience. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that we would say is whatever you pack, if you packed a lot of stuff, whatever you pack, cut that in half.
Yeah.
Because the
Definitely.
hassles at airports or any place where you have to move your luggage is tremendous.
Yes.
And if you could carry all your luggage by yourself, in 2 hands, that's the best.
The least amount of luggage that you can carry, the better, and they will weigh your luggage, especially in foreign airports.
Yes, we had one night where we were up, and I was taking our stuff, and repacking it, and then weighing each thing so that we could go to Owazu Falls. And I believe it was 30.
Yeah, because it'd only be 30 pounds, and so we had to scale down from 50 pounds to 30 pounds into a smaller suitcase, and then we had the concierge at the hotel bring us up a scale so that we could actually weigh it, because our guide had said you absolutely, can't go over, they'll charge, of course you can fork over money and pay for it, but that's a hassle, of course. Pack less. You just don't need as much as you think you do.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to bring anything back.
Absolutely, you need room.
Right.
Yeah, you got an iceberg you're bringing back. They're going to be weighing that in at the airport, that's for sure.
That's right. And of course, planning to be gone for a length of time, you need to think about how are you going to pay your bills while you're away.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that seems obvious, but we actually, thought about that a lot and, worked extra to make the money to pay all of the bills while we're away, plus, of course, having the money to go on the trip with a little extra spending money. And, of course, you have to pay all your bills, either online or you have to pay them in advance. We paid all of our, credit card and utility bills and all of those things just the day before that we left. Mm-hmm. And so that, they would clear the bank and everything would be good. And I was able to finally call in once and make sure that everything was okay because I worried about that while we were away a little bit. So those lots of details. Make lists of things that you want to pack, which is something that we were just talking before we called in here.
Yeah.
We actually didn't do that. And when we discovered we didn't have the charging device, which was how we were actually going to call home, that was very important. So then we had to go out on this big excursion to find a charger for the BlackBerry phone.
Which we did find.
If we'd made a list before we left, we probably would have packed it. But we were exhausted the night before, so mm-hmm. Things do happen. Home security, I think, is very important. So we got a timer for lights in our house.
Yeah. So
that lights would come on and go off at different times of the day and evening. We had a relative come by and check the house because it was going to be very cold. We wanted to make sure that the pipes wouldn't burst. Just real basic things like that I think are very important for people to consider if you're going to leave your house for a month.
Yeah, you don't want to come back and have a fiasco.
That'd make enough sense, that's for sure.
And something else that also is very important, when we decided to go on the trip, our travel agent said, you really should get travel insurance.
Yes,
you don't have to get it, but it's a very good idea to get it because it can insure for anything as small as lost luggage up to medevac off the ship if you have, say, a heart attack and they have doctors on the ship, but maybe you need to get specialized care or whatever. So the policy that we had actually covers $500,000 in medical travel expenses.
Wow.
And so that's really important and comforting.
Yeah. Another thing about the insurance, and that is for like lost luggage and things like that, the insurance is really secondary insurance. So you have to make efforts with the hotel or the airline to get them to pay or reimburse you for your lost luggage before your insurance will kick in.
Absolutely. And with insurance, keep receipts of absolutely everything that you think you might want to get reimbursed for, because they won't reimburse unless you have those receipts. So in our case, we actually had the experience of one piece of luggage being not getting on the ship with us and being left at the hotel in Buenos Aires. And so we had to buy some supplies in the Falkland Islands and then actually visit the ship doctor to get some medication.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, it wasn't that expensive, but it was, an extra $100 that we didn't really want to spend.
Right.
And so we decided that we would turn that claim into the insurance carrier when we got home and discovered that we had to go back to the hotel and say to them, will you reimburse us for these expenses because the luggage was at the hotel. And, of course, the hotel was in Buenos Aires. They speak Spanish. I don't. They didn't respond to my emails. I tried to get our travel group leader in Argentina to address this issue with them, and she couldn't get anywhere with them. So then I called the insurance carrier, and they said, well, the only thing that you can really do is have your group leader, since he was with you, notarize a letter. He had to go to a bank and get it notarized, stating that, yes, our luggage was lost and it wasn't our fault.
Yeah.
And so he did that, fortunately. And
so much for courtesy, huh?
Yeah.
There they boast about all this great service until there's something wrong, and then nobody wants to take responsibility for it.
That's when you find out, we paid our insurance policy, for people to want to know how much travel insurance costs. For our 24-day trip, we paid $583 for the travel insurance, which covered both of us.
Yeah.
which isn't that bad. You know, if something horrible happened, it would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Because I called them today to ask them about the Medivac service, and she said, yeah, we'll fly you, you know, wherever you need to get. If you don't have medical service where you are, we'll get you there. Then we'll fly you back to your ship, or we'll fly you home, and, you know, make sure that gets taken care of. So that's good.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly important that when you're going on such a wonderful, even magical trip, if you will, that you cover a lot of those bases being prepared so that you can spend more time enjoying what's going on rather than, you know, being paranoid about the things that you weren't expecting to come up. I've been fortunate to do quite a few different shows where people would do year, 6 months traveling overseas, and there's just lots and lots for people to really consider, and they can also go to some of our past shows as well to pick up on some other tips because as we're running out of time here, but we'll also post a nice little list on our website's blog so people can just get a better idea coming from your folks and from your experience how they can prepare themselves so they can enjoy the trip rather than being kind of like dreading the whole thing in the first place.
Right.
And I'd like very much to thank both of you for joining us here on the program. Is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners in closing when it comes to travel?
Well, my closing thought would be just be open to the adventure and try to relax and enjoy it, live in the moment when you're away because there's always going to be glitches.
Yep.
And, you know, really, I would never have thought of that we would go to Antarctica or the Falkland Islands, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And another thing to consider, too, even though you may get scammed or manipulated, hey, that's part of the travel story.
That's right. That's right. It helps with that.
Well, thank you very much, Jenny Waters and Derek Ewell for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today. And we'll be sure to have you participate in another conversation as you take another trip to, I believe it's the North Pole?
That's right. That's where we're headed next.
Okay, going to do that little dog sled race they've got going on up there, I'm sure. Maybe. I was kind of curious, just in closing before you're off, did you get to hear any stories about the Endurance?
The what?
The Endurance, because being down in Antarctic, I figured maybe somebody would tell you the story about the MSS Endurance. It's the Shackleton ship.
Oh, you know, I heard them talk about the Shackleton ship, but, you know, there was always somebody talking and giving lectures, but I didn't hear that.
Are you talking about the ship that sunk?
Yeah, no, they didn't sink at all. That's actually a different show. Well, you can actually pick up the documentary called The Endurance, and it tells you all about what happened there. Magnificent story. So anytime I think of Antarctic, I always think of that particular story, and that'd be definitely worth maybe exploring that route. As you were saying, there are smaller ships that can take you deeper, but you're interested in kind of relaxing. I'd imagine after 200 hours worth of flight, that's exactly the only thing you could do physically anymore. So.
Well, I wanted to say that we did go to the site where a ship had sunk a month before we got there.
Oh, wow.
It was a small ship, and there was about 200 passengers, and they all got out on lifeboats.
But the ship sunk completely.
Oh, boy. That's no good.
Yeah, I pointed that out on the loudspeaker, and that's where the ship went down. So.
Well, thank you again for joining us on the program today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You bet. For those of you tuning in, we were talking with Derek Ewell and Jenny Waters about their excursion to the Antarctic, and also the things you need to consider when you're planning, especially a trip outside of the United States, because things aren't just as technologically advanced in all areas as you might think. So again, proper planning, always plan, and be sure to have as much time as you can to plan for your trip. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us today. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. Be sure to visit us at our website, beyond50radio.com. That is the number 550. And if you want to find out more about our past episodes, just simply click on the episodes button. That'll take you right to our page where you can find some of the archives, especially for the traveling, because there's a lot of great tips and things you can learn from some of our past shows as well as today's show. And also check out our blog. That's where we also keep the information in text so you can read that and participate as well. Again, thank you for joining us today, and remember, live your day past halfway.